Question 1. An Agile team's Scrum Master notices that the developers are consistently being interrupted by stakeholders asking for status updates. This is causing the team to lose focus and fall behind on their sprint goal. What is the most appropriate first action for the Scrum Master to take? A. Ask the product owner to add stakeholder communication as a story in the next sprint. B. Coach the stakeholders on the purpose of Scrum events and how to engage with the team appropriately. C. Tell the developers to ignore any requests from outside the team. D. Report the stakeholders' behavior to their functional managers. Answer. B. Coach the stakeholders on the purpose of Scrum events and how to engage with the team appropriately. The most appropriate action is to coach the stakeholders on how to engage with the team. The Scrum Master serves as a coach and facilitator, not just for the team but for the entire organization in its understanding and adoption of Scrum. This involves teaching stakeholders about the proper channels for information, such as the sprint review, and protecting the team from external interruptions that disrupt the flow of work. For instance, the Scrum Master might explain that the daily Scrum is for the developers and that the sprint review is the formal opportunity to inspect the increment and ask questions. A great takeaway is to remember that the Scrum Master's role includes removing impediments, and an uninformed stakeholder is an impediment that can often be resolved through education and coaching. Question 2. A project manager is analyzing a project schedule network diagram and identifies a path with zero total float. What does this path represent? The critical path. B. A near critical path. C. The path with the most resources. D. The path with the highest risk. Answer. A. The critical path. The path with zero total float is the critical path of the project. Total float, or slack, is the amount of time a task can be delayed without causing a delay to the project completion date. Therefore, any delay in an activity on the critical path will directly delay the entire project's finish date. For example, if building the foundation of a house is on the critical path, a one-day delay in pouring the concrete will push back the final move-in date by 1 day. Always remember that the critical path is the longest duration path through the network diagram, which is why it has no room for delays. Question 3. During a weekly project meeting, a key stakeholder expresses dissatisfaction with the project's progress, claiming their expectations are not being met. This is the first time the project manager has heard this feedback. Which performance domain requires immediate attention from the project manager? Delivery performance domain. B. Planning performance domain. C. Measurement performance domain. D. Stakeholder performance domain. Answer. D. Stakeholder performance domain. The stakeholder performance domain requires immediate attention because it addresses activities and functions associated with managing stakeholder relationships and engagement to foster supportive collaboration. The stakeholders' expressed dissatisfaction is a clear indicator of a breakdown in engagement, communication, or expectation management. Addressing this involves understanding the stakeholders' perspective, clarifying expectations, and adjusting communication and engagement strategies, all of which are central to this domain. Think of the stakeholder performance domain as the relationship management part of your project. If a key relationship is struggling, it needs to be your top priority. Question 4. What is the primary purpose of the daily Scrum in an Agile project? A. To provide a detailed status report to the product owner and stakeholders. B. For the developers to inspect progress toward the sprint goal and adapt the sprint backlog. C. To resolve complex technical problems and re-estimate remaining work. D. For the Scrum Master to assign daily tasks to each developer. Answer. B. For the developers to inspect progress toward the sprint goal and adapt the sprint backlog. The primary purpose of the daily Scrum is for the developers to synchronize their activities and create a plan for the next 24 hours. It is a 15-minute time-boxed event where the team inspects its progress toward the sprint goal and adapts the sprint backlog as necessary, adjusting the upcoming planned work. This event is not a status meeting for external stakeholders but an internal planning meeting for those doing the work. For example, a developer might say, "Yesterday I finished the login feature, today I will start the password reset, and I see no impediments to our sprint goal." A simple way to remember its function is, The daily Scrum is a huddle for the players, developers, not a press conference for the fans, stakeholders. Question 5. A project manager is proactively identifying, analyzing, and planning responses to potential events that could impact the project. Where should this information be formally documented? In the project charter. B. In the risk register. C. In the stakeholder register. D. In the lessons learned repository. Answer B. In the risk register. The risk register is the central document for all risk management activities. It serves as a log to record identified risks, the results of their analysis, like probability and impact, and the planned risk responses. As the project progresses, this document is continuously updated to track the status of existing risks and add new ones as they emerge. For instance, if a project has a risk of a key supplier failing to deliver on time, the risk register would list this risk, its potential impact on the schedule, and the response plan, such as identifying a backup supplier. Think of the risk register as the project's worry list that you formally manage and plan for. Question 6. Who is responsible for defining the items in the product backlog and deciding their order? The Scrum Master. B. The product owner. C. The developers. D. The key stakeholders. Answer B. The product owner. The product owner is the sole person responsible for managing the product backlog, which includes creating and clearly communicating product backlog items, and ordering them to best achieve the project's goals and mission. While the product owner may be influenced by stakeholders and receive input from the developers, the final accountability for the content and prioritization of the backlog rests with them. This ensures a single, clear direction for the product's development. For instance, the product owner would decide that a user payment feature is more valuable to the business right now than a user profile customization feature and would place it higher in the backlog. The key takeaway is to view the product owner as the value maximizer, who steers the project through the prioritized backlog. Question 7. A project has a cost performance index (CPI) of 0.85. What does this value indicate about the project's financial performance? A. The project is over budget. B. The project is under budget. C. The project is exactly on budget. D. The project's budget is no longer a valid measure. Answer A. The project is over budget. The Cost Performance Index (CPI) is a key earned value management (EVM) metric that measures the cost efficiency of the work performed. A CPI value less than 1.0 indicates that the project is over budget, meaning it is costing more than planned to achieve the work that has been completed. The formula is CPI equals earned value (EV) / actual cost (AC). In this case, with a CPI of 0.85 for every $1 spent, the project is only earning 85 cents worth of plan value. An easy way to remember this is, if CPI is less than 1, you're over budget and the run is no fun. Question 8. An agile team uses the INVEST acronym to help them write high-quality user stories. What does the N in INVEST stand for? Necessary. B. Non-functional. Negotiable. Novel. The answer. Negotiable. The N in the INVEST acronym for user stories stands for negotiable. This principle emphasizes that a user story is not a rigid contract but an invitation to a conversation. It captures the essence of what is desired, but the details of how it will be implemented are open for discussion and collaboration between the product owner and the developers during backlog refinement and sprint planning. For example, a story like, "As a shopper, I want to filter products by color," is negotiable because the team can discuss whether the filter should be a drop-down, checkboxes, or clickable swatches. Remember that user stories are placeholders for conversation, not detailed specifications set in stone. Question 9. A project is underway when the customer requests a significant change to the product design. This change will affect the project's scope, schedule, and budget. What is the first thing the project manager should do? A. Reject the change because it is too late in the project lifecycle. B. Implement the change immediately to satisfy the customer. C. Document the requested change and assess its impact on the project. D. Ask the project sponsor for additional funding to cover the change. Answer: C. Document the requested change and assess its impact on the project. The correct first step is to formally document the requested change and perform an impact assessment. Before a change can be approved or rejected, its full effect on all project constraints, scope, schedule, cost, quality, risk, and resources, must be understood. This analysis provides the necessary information for decision-makers, like a change control board or the sponsor, to make an informed choice. Simply rejecting the change dismisses a potentially valuable opportunity, while immediately implementing it without analysis is reckless. The key principle is to always follow a structured change control process, starting with understanding the change's impact. Question 10. A project team is developing a new, innovative medical device where the requirements are expected to change frequently as research yields new information. The project has high uncertainty and a need for frequent feedback. Which development approach would be most suitable? Predictive. B. Waterfall. Iterative. Agile. Answer: D. Agile. An agile approach is most suitable for projects characterized by high uncertainty, complex problems, and evolving requirements. The question highlights key triggers for an agile mindset: innovative technology, frequently changing requirements, and the need for frequent feedback. Agile methods like Scrum or Kanban use short cycles, iterations, or sprints to deliver value, gather feedback, and adapt the plan, making them ideal for navigating the ambiguity described. A predictive or waterfall approach, which requires requirements to be fully defined up front, would be too rigid and likely fail in such a dynamic environment. A simple rule of thumb is: if the what and how are unclear and likely to change, go agile. Question 11. A Kanban team is experiencing bottlenecks where work piles up in the in-progress column of their board, while team members in later stages are often idle. What Kanban practice should the team implement to address this issue? A. Increase the number of items in the backlog. B. Implement work in progress, WIP, limits. C. Hold longer daily stand-up meetings. D. Assign a dedicated person to each column. Answer: B. Implement work in progress, WIP, limits. Implementing work in progress, WIP, limits is the core Kanban practice designed to solve this exact problem. WIP limits restrict the maximum number of items that can be in a particular stage or column of the workflow at any given time. This prevents work from piling up, exposes bottlenecks, and encourages the team to collaborate on finishing existing work before starting new work, a concept known as stop starting, start finishing. For example, setting a WIP limit of 3 on the in-progress column means the team cannot pull a new item into that stage until one of the current 3 items moves to the next stage, thereby improving flow. Question 12. A project manager needs to decompose the total scope of work to be carried out by the project team to accomplish the project objectives and create the required deliverables. What tool or technique should be used? A Gantt chart. B. A requirements traceability matrix. C. A work breakdown structure, WBS. D. A project schedule network diagram. Answer: C. A work breakdown structure, WBS. The work breakdown structure, WBS, is the fundamental tool used to decompose project scope into smaller, more manageable components. It organizes the team's work into a hierarchical structure, with the final deliverables at the top level, broken down into subdeliverables and finally into work packages. The WBS ensures that all required work is identified and prevents work that is outside the project's scope from being done. For example, building a bicycle could be broken down into frame, wheels, and drivetrain, with each of those further broken down into their constituent parts and assembly tasks. Think of the WBS as a map of everything the project will deliver. If it's not in the WBS, it's not in the project scope. Question 13. During a sprint retrospective, a team discusses that they were not able to complete all the items they had planned for the sprint. What should be the primary focus of the discussion? A. Who on the team was responsible for the unfinished work? B. Why the product owner allowed too much work into the sprint? C. What process improvements can be made to help in future sprints? D. How to justify the failure to meet the forecast to stakeholders. Answer. C. What process improvements can be made to help in future sprints? The primary focus of the sprint retrospective is on process improvement. It is a dedicated event for the Scrum team to inspect itself and create a plan for improvements to be enacted during the next sprint. The goal is not to assign blame but to identify the root causes of issues and collaboratively find solutions related to processes, tools, or team dynamics. For example, the team might identify that their user stories were not well defined, leading to rework, and decide to spend more time on backlog refinement in the next sprint. Remember, the retrospective's motto is about inspecting and adapting the process, not the people. Question 14. Which document formally authorizes the existence of a project and provides the project manager with the authority to apply organizational resources to project activities? The project management plan. B. The business case. The project charter. D. The statement of work, SOW. Answer. C. The project charter. The project charter is the foundational document that formally initiates a project. It is typically issued by the project sponsor or initiator, and its key functions are to authorize the project's existence and to empower the project manager with the authority to use organizational resources. The charter provides a high-level overview of the project's objectives, key stakeholders, assumptions, constraints, and success criteria. For instance, before a project to build a new corporate website can begin, a senior executive would sign a project charter that officially sanctions the project and names the project manager. Think of the project charter as the project's official birth certificate. Question 15. An agile team is having recurring debates about whether a user story is truly finished at the end of a sprint. To prevent this ambiguity, the team should create and adhere to what? A set of acceptance criteria for each story. B. A definition of done, DoD. The sprint goal. D. A requirements traceability matrix. Answer. B. A definition of done, DoD. The definition of done, DoD, is a formal description of the state of the increment when it meets the quality measures required for the product. It is a shared understanding across the Scrum team of what it means for work to be complete. While individual user stories have their own acceptance criteria, the DoD is a broader, overarching checklist that applies to all work, ensuring consistency and quality. For example, a team's DoD might require that all code be peer-reviewed, passed through automated testing, and integrated into the main branch before any user story can be considered done. A clear DoD is crucial for preventing misunderstandings and ensuring a high-quality, potentially releasable increment is produced each sprint. Question 16. A project manager is explaining to a stakeholder that spending money on activities like training, quality planning, and equipment calibration is a worthwhile investment. These expenditures are examples of what type of quality cost? A. Cost of conformance prevention costs. B. Cost of non-conformance internal failure costs. C. Cost of conformance appraisal costs. D. Cost of non-conformance external failure costs. Answer. A. Cost of conformance prevention costs. These are examples of prevention costs, which fall under the category of cost of conformance. The cost of quality concept is divided into two main parts: the cost of conformance, money spent to avoid failures, and the cost of non-conformance, money spent because of failures. Prevention costs are proactive investments made to prevent defects from occurring in the first place, such as proper training, documenting processes, and using the right equipment. This is distinct from appraisal costs like testing and inspection, which are also part of conformance, but focus on finding defects rather than preventing them. A helpful tip is to remember that prevention is always better and cheaper than the cure, making these proactive costs a wise investment. Question 17. According to the PMBOK Guide, 7th edition, the measurement performance domain is primarily concerned with what? A. Tracking the schedule and budget using Earned Value Management, EVM. B. Assessing project performance and taking appropriate actions to maintain acceptable performance. C. Reporting status to stakeholders based on their communication preferences. D. Creating detailed metrics for every task in the work breakdown structure. Answer: B. Assessing project performance and taking appropriate actions to maintain acceptable performance. The measurement performance domain focuses on evaluating project performance and implementing appropriate responses to ensure the project stays on track to deliver its intended value. This is a broad concept that goes beyond just schedule and budget. It includes tracking progress, forecasting future performance, and making timely decisions based on reliable data. The key word is assessing and taking action, which highlights the proactive nature of this domain. For instance, if lead time metrics show a process is slowing down, the team would use this measurement to investigate and fix the bottleneck, which is the essence of effective measurement. The goal is to use data not just to report the past but to guide the future. Question 18. An agile team completes 25 story points in its first sprint, 30 in its second, and 28 in its third. What is the team's calculated velocity? 25. B. 28. B. 30. 83. Answer: B. 28. Velocity is a measure of the amount of work a team can tackle during a single sprint and is a key metric in agile planning. It is typically calculated by taking the average number of story points completed over the last few sprints. In this case, the average of the completed story points, 25, 30, and 28, is 25 plus 30 plus 28. /3 is equal to 83 /3 is equal to 27.67, which rounds to 28. This historical average helps the team forecast how much work they can realistically commit to in future sprints, making their planning more reliable. Remember, velocity is a measure for the team's own forecasting and should not be used to compare different teams. Question 19. A project manager is categorizing project stakeholders to define an engagement strategy. She plots them on a grid based on their ability to influence the project and their interest in the project. What is this tool commonly called? A stakeholder register. B. A RACI chart. C. A power/interest grid. D. A communication management plan. Answer: C. A power/interest grid. A power/interest grid is a common tool used for stakeholder analysis that involves classifying stakeholders based on their level of authority, power, and their level of concern about the project's outcomes, interest. This classification helps the project manager determine the appropriate engagement strategy for each stakeholder group. For example, a stakeholder with high power and high interest, like the project sponsor, must be managed closely, while a stakeholder with low power and low interest should just be monitored. This tool is a simple but effective way to prioritize efforts and ensure key stakeholders are managed effectively. Question 20. A Scrum team consistently avoids difficult conversations during the sprint retrospective, and team members are hesitant to share feedback that might cause conflict. Which Scrum value is the team failing to exhibit? B. Focus. B. Respect. B. Courage. D. Commitment. Answer: courage. The team is failing to exhibit the Scrum value of courage. Courage in a Scrum context means team members feel safe enough to be transparent about challenges, to have difficult conversations, to work on tough problems, and to question the status quo for the sake of improvement. Avoiding necessary but uncomfortable discussions during the retrospective shows a lack of courage to confront issues head-on. The Scrum Master should work to build a psychologically safe environment where team members are empowered to speak up without fear of blame. A great way to think about this is that real progress often requires the courage to tackle uncomfortable truths. Question 21. A project is operating in a highly volatile market where customer preferences can shift unexpectedly, creating significant ambiguity. According to the PMBOK Guide, 7th edition, which performance domain specifically addresses how the team will navigate such high levels of uncertainty. Planning performance domain. B. Uncertainty performance domain. C. Team performance domain. D. Delivery performance domain. Answer: B. Uncertainty performance domain. The uncertainty performance domain directly addresses the activities and functions associated with risk and uncertainty. This domain encompasses not just traditional risk management, identifying and planning for specific foreseeable threats, but also navigating ambiguity and volatility where events are not predictable. In a volatile market, the team needs to be resilient, adaptable, and prepared for unexpected shifts, which are the core concerns of this domain. For instance, a team might use short feedback loops and build options into their plan to better respond to the market's unpredictability. A good way to remember this is, while the planning domain creates the map, the uncertainty domain helps you navigate when you go off the map. Question 22. What is the primary purpose of the sprint review event in Scrum? To demonstrate the work done and get feedback from stakeholders on the product increment. B. For the team to reflect on their process and identify improvements for the next sprint. C. To provide a status update to management on the budget and schedule. D. For the developers to plan the work for the next 24 hours. Answer. A. To demonstrate the work done and get feedback from stakeholders on the product increment. The sprint review is a collaborative event where the Scrum team and stakeholders inspect the increment produced during the sprint and adapt the product backlog if needed. Its main purpose is to gather feedback on the product itself, which then informs what to work on next. This is different from the sprint retrospective, which focuses on improving the process. During the review, the team demonstrates what they accomplished, and stakeholders provide input that helps the product owner adjust future plans. Think of the sprint review as a demo and feedback session for the product, while the retrospective is a team process improvement session. Question 23. A project scope has gradually expanded over time with small, unapproved changes being added without following the formal change control process. What is this phenomenon called? Scope validation. B. Scope creep. Value engineering. D. Gold plating. Answer. Scope creep. This phenomenon is known as scope creep, which is the uncontrolled expansion of a project's scope due to unauthorized and unmanaged changes. It happens when small, seemingly minor additions are made without formal review and approval, gradually adding up to a significant deviation from the original plan. This often leads to delays, budget overruns, and resource strain. For example, a client asking for just one more small button on a user interface multiple times without a formal change request can lead to scope creep. A key takeaway for project managers is that a disciplined change control process is the best defense against the slow and steady threat of scope creep. Question 24. A project manager spends most of their time ensuring the team has the resources they need, removing obstacles and facilitating collaboration rather than directing and controlling their work. Which leadership style is this project manager demonstrating? Autocratic. B. C. Transactional. Servant leadership. Answer. D. Servant leadership. This project manager is demonstrating servant leadership, a style that is foundational to agile approaches like Scrum. A servant leader focuses on the needs of the team members and the customer, with the aim of facilitating an environment where the team can perform at its highest level. Their main goal is to serve rather than command, which involves removing impediments, shielding the team from distractions, and providing support. This contrasts sharply with an autocratic style which is based on individual control and command. Think of a servant leader as the person who clears the path for the team, rather than the person who tells the team which path to take. Question 25. An agile team finds that their sprint planning meetings are taking too long because they are trying to understand and estimate user stories for the first time. What activity should the team be doing more regularly to make sprint planning more efficient? Daily scrums. B. Product backlog refinement. T. Sprint reviews. D. Stakeholder analysis. Answer B. Product backlog refinement. The team should engage in regular product backlog refinement to make sprint planning more efficient. Backlog refinement, sometimes called backlog grooming, is the ongoing process of adding detail, estimates, and order to items in the product backlog. By doing this throughout the sprint, not just during sprint planning, the team ensures that items at the top of the backlog are well understood and ready to be pulled into the next sprint. This makes the sprint planning event smoother and faster because the discussion can focus on crafting a sprint goal and forecasting the work, rather than understanding the requirements from scratch. A good rule of thumb is that a team should spend up to 10% of its capacity on this refinement activity.